بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وخليله، بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح الأمة وكشف الغمة وتركنا على محجة بيضاء ليلها كنهارها لا يزيغ عنها إلا هالك. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا واتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، إن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. إخوتي وأخواتي الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I'd like to start off today with a quick story of an encounter I had a week ago, and I want you to think about this encounter throughout the whole entire khutbah until the end we connect, inshallah. So as you all know, the recent events that had happened in the Western world, where the Quran was burned not only once or twice, but 3 times in the course of 2 weeks. I was sitting with a few brothers, teenagers, between the ages of 15 or 14 and 17 years old. And we were having a discussion, and this idea came up. What do you guys think about what happened in Sweden with the Danish officials burning the Quran, and what does this mean to us? What should we do? Unfortunately, the reaction that we had from these shabab was not the reaction that we expected us Muslims to have. The reaction was, as I'm telling you, what's the problem? What's the big deal? They even went as far to say that, isn't it permissible to burn ayat of the Quran to dispose of it so you don't dispose of it? So they even went to the extent to give this person the excuse of burning the Quran multiple times in front of the masjid, not as hatred towards Islam, as an excuse that maybe he was disposing of it. This is the reality of today. As I said, keep thinking about this as we go through the khutbah, please. The title of today's khutbah is Izzatul Muslim wa Thabatu ala al-Istiqamah. So the honor and pride of the believer and staying firm on the path of guidance, the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to understand 2 very core issues. Number 1 is that the most important decision that we make in our whole entire life, the most important one is the decision of istiqamah, the decision to follow the guidance in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the most important decision any human takes or needs to take in his whole entire life. Number 2 is to understand the honor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows to a select number of his ummah to carry out the message of Islam. The honor and the pride that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a few members of this ummah to carry out the victory of Islam and the message of Islam. When it comes to the first decision, the decision of following the path and the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the decision of istiqamah, that entitles many things. Number 1 is turning away from sins. Turning away from sins that you used to do. Turning away from habits that you used to do. Trying to follow what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained for us. What is permissible, and stay away from what is not permissible. Another one is the idea of al-wala wal-bara, to love what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves and to hate what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates. To hate the actions Allah hates. To hate the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates. And only do that which gets you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another point when it comes to the decision of istiqamah is controlling oneself. Tarweedun nafs, controlling your desires and your temptations, and controlling yourself. Because if you're not able to control yourself and your desires, then you're not going to stay very long on this decision that you've taken. And I'm sure this resonates with everybody, that everybody at some point in his life has taken this decision, has said enough is enough, and I'm going to leave behind what I was upon, and I'm going to follow the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm going to follow the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the best of my ability. Everybody, I'm sure, can resonate and knows that they've made that decision at some point in life. Sometimes we make it every day, every week, every month, every couple of years. Whatever situation or hardship we go through, we're reminded and we go back to it. But what is the main core issue after this decision? The core issue and the biggest issue that us human beings face is how to stay firm on this decision. So it's at-thabatu ala al-istiqama. How can we stay firm on this decision and stay firm on this path and not deviate away from it and not fail and not fall? That is the number one issue. Because if we solve this issue, then we can stay on the guidance in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we can seek the reward that is greater than akhirah. We have to understand that when making this decision and trying to stay firm on this path, we have to understand that this is an expensive price to pay. We have to understand that following the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to understand that a Jannah, paradise, has a very, very, very expensive entry fee. It is not easy. And it comes with many different hardships, and many different trials, and many different tribulations, and many things that you have to sacrifice to get to it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself tells us this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Ankabut, Alif Lam Mim, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يَفْتَنُونَ. Do people think that they will be left to say, we have believed, and they're not going to be tested and tried? Allah is telling you, from now, if you decide to take this decision and you want to stay firm on it, trials and tribulations are going to come. Who are the ones that sacrificed the most in the whole entire history of humanity? The prophets. They carried out the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The messengers. They're the ones that faced the most trials. They're the ones that had the most hardships. They're the ones that sacrificed the most. They even lost their lives, some of them. They were killed by their people. Imagine, they lost their lives, but guess what? The reward is much greater for what they paid for. So we have to understand what comes with making this decision. And another very important point when it comes to why do we not stay steadfast or firm on this decision that we make, that we want to stay guided. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, في سورة الحجرات, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانَ وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ وَكَرَّهَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْكُفْرَ وَالْفُسُوقَ وَالْعِصْيَانَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, but Allah has endeared faith to you, making it appealing to your hearts, and He has made disbelief, rebelliousness, and disobedience detestable to you, or hating to you. So Allah is telling you that He made Islam and following the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala something that the human being loves and something that the heart beloves and longs to. So that means that those that do not stay firm on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have not truly tasted the sweetness of Iman, have not truly understood what Jannah and Nar is, have not truly understood what the reward of following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, have not truly understood what the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is and who He is as a creator, and your weakness and your need to worship Him. If we have not understood this, that means we have not tasted the sweetness of Iman. Because if you have tasted the sweetness of Iman, nobody tastes the sweetness of Iman that we're talking about and goes back to what he was upon. Nobody truly feels this feeling and understands what the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means and understands what the reward of Jannah is, and he reverts back to what he was upon. Nobody. So we need to understand what we're paying for. We need to understand the true worth of this dunya. We need to understand the honor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed upon us. Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not just as Muslims, but also the Ummah of Muhammad. We have to understand these things. And once we begin to understand them, our heart will accept Iman. And you will become to a point, don't think it's impossible, you will get to a point where you not only do not indulge in the sinful acts that you used to, but you hate those sinful acts. You absolutely hate them. If you see somebody doing those actions, you hate those actions. So it's not me just forcing my desires in myself to stay away from these actions. You will get to a point where you hate these actions, and you can't even sit next to somebody that does these actions or see these actions being done in front of you. And this is not a level of angels that nobody could reach. This is a level that human beings, not prophets, other than the prophets, human beings like me and you have reached. As-Sahaba radiallahu anhum reached this level of iman, this level of understanding, this level of sacrifice. Because what? They stayed firm upon the truth. They stayed firm upon the decision that they made. When every single one of them accepted Islam, he made a decision to follow the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and leave everything behind. Mus'ab ibn Umayr left his family and his wealth all behind. Nothing, left with nothing. You have other examples of the Sahaba that sacrificed everything in their life. Whether it be health, whether it be money, whether it be family, whether it be their trade, whether it be their hometown and their tribe. They sacrificed everything for Islam. And they stayed upon that truth. They stayed upon that decision that they made. Another thing, or another obstacle that we face when trying to stay firm on the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or trying to stay firm on this decision that we make, is not only sins, but it's fitan that we see around us, corruption, and temptations and desires that we see around us. And it's important to stay away from these fitan, from these temptations, and to turn against them. Because if we slowly accept one fitna after another, we will see our heart will become just as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam describes it. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells Hudayfa al-Yaman what happens to a heart when it accepts too much fitan. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, تُعْرَضُ الْفِتَنِ عَلَى الْقُلُوبِ كَالْحَصِيرِ عُودًا عُودًا. So Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, temptations or fitan will be presented to men's hearts as a reed mat is woven stick by stick. So a reed mat, a hasira, if anybody knows, is the mat that's made out of the straws that are woven into one each other. So the fitan come right after each other, as if they're woven with together. Fitna after fitna after fitna after fitna. فَأَيِّ قَلْبٍ أُشْرِبُهَا نُكِتَ فِيهِ نُكْتَةٍ سَوْدَاء. And any heart that accepts any one of these fitan, a black dot is imprinted in his heart. وَأَيِّ قَلْبٍ أنكرها نكت فيه نكتة بيضاء. And any heart that rejects this fitna, a white dot is imprinted onto his heart. حتى تصير على قلبين. Until there's only two hearts. على بياض مثل الصفا فلا تضره فتنة ما دامت السماوات والأرض. A heart that is so pure, that is so white, that it can never accept any fitna or any temptation as long as the heavens and the earth are standing up. Imagine. And the other heart, وَالْآخَرُ أَسْوَدُ مُرْبَدًّا كَالْكُوزِ مُجَخِّيًا. And the other heart is black. And Rasulullah ﷺ describes it not only as black, but as a cup that is flipped over. So imagine a cup that is flipped over. No matter how much water you pour on top of it, it's never going to get clean. That's it. It is sealed. This heart has taken too many fitan in, and has accepted too many temptations and desires. That is it. This heart is black and it is flipped over, and no matter what you do, you cannot wash out this heart. And he goes on to say, لا يعرف معروفا ولا ينكر منكرا. So he does not recognize what is good or rejecting what is evil. It's to the point where this black heart cannot even recognize what is right, what is wrong, cannot even go back to make the decision of, I want to follow the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what fitan do to us. As do sins. When you commit a sin day after day after day and don't think a second about it, this is what happens to your heart. Your heart becomes like a rock. And staying on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, staying firm on the decision of istiqamah that you might have made years ago, becomes even harder and harder, if not impossible. But let us look at those who have achieved this. And like we said, this is something that is not impossible to achieve. This is something that we can achieve. This is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us by telling us in the Quran that He made this level, He made this iman beloved to our hearts. That means we could get to this level of iman. That means we could reject these fitan. That means we could stay away from the sins that we used to do. Whatever, how addicted we were, how hard they were, we do not follow our desires. But let us look again to those that truly gain this position. And I'm going to define these people as true men. As true men of Islam. Anybody that does not follow in their footsteps are not considered men. Anybody that does not have the honor and the dignity and the pride and the courage and the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not considered a man. But these are true men. As-Sahaba, where they used to leave not only the haram, they used to leave the mubah, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made permissible for them, just in fear of not falling into haram. They not have only rejected haram, they have even rejected things that are permissible for them because they fear that leading to them falling into haram. And resisting temptations is an important one. How the Sahaba radiallahu anhum resisted temptations. And don't think that the temptations that we have today in 2023 is different than the temptations that they had. The same exact temptations they had as the temptations that we had. The temptation of wealth, the temptation of usury, the temptation of women, everything is there. They're the same human beings, same instincts, same exact temptations and desires at their time as our time. So there's no excuse to say they lived in a different period. They have an excuse. That's why they had less temptations than us. Look at us today. We walk outside and look at the people. Every single transaction you want to make is deals with riba. If you choose the path of istiqamah, and the path, the straight path, and the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is nothing that could stop you, no matter the temptations and the desires. And the sacrifice, most important, that the Sahaba had. An example of two Sahaba, Khabbab ibn al-Arat, when he was persecuted and tortured in Mecca, after Rasulullah ﷺ made hijrah, and the disbelievers of Quraysh offered him what? They said, why don't Muhammad come take your place being tortured, and you will be let out to enjoy life with your family. What was the response of Khabbab radiallahu anhu? He said, Wallahi, I will not let Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam be poked with just a needle. Imagine, just poked with a needle while I am sitting at home with my family safe and happy. Not taking his spot being tortured, just being poked by a needle. That's the sacrifice that they made. And the lives, they lost their lives for the sacrifice of the deen of Islam. Why? Because they understood the true sweetness of Iman. They understood the true reward that they would be getting in the Akhirah. Another prime example that I love to listen about is the Battle of Mu'tah. The Battle of Mu'tah was against the Romans. And they have gathered an army of 100,000 people. And they gathered another 100,000 from the neighboring Arab tribes. So 200,000. That is bigger than a population of a city. Against the Muslims that came out, 3,000. So a speck compared to an ocean. 3,000 versus 200,000. 70 times greater than the number of Muslims that came out. Rasulullah ﷺ did not go out into this battle. Rather, he sent or chose 3 Sahaba to lead this battle. And if one of them dies, then the other takes the flag. And the other dies, the other takes the flag. Those are Zayd ibn Harith, wa Ja'far bin Abi Talib, wa Abdullah ibn Rawah. So they go into battle, and Zayd ibn Harith falls. And the flag falls out of his hand, and he's killed. Ja'far ibn Abi Talib takes the flag. His right hand is cut off, he grabs the flag with his left. His left hand is cut off, and he grabs the flag with his chest. And he is killed. And finally, we have Abdullah ibn Rawah. Imagine, the 2 leaders that Rasulullah ﷺ chose in front of you have both been killed. And you have been burdened with a task to continue fighting. When you have a limited amount of warriors with you, and you have an army that you cannot even see the beginning towards the end. Abdullah ibn Rawah was in a situation. He was sitting on his horse. And what did he say to himself? He's talking to himself. He said, Wallahi latanzilan. I swear that you are going to get off this horse and you're going to go down and fight. He was fearful. Imagine the situation that Abdullah ibn Rawah is in. He swore to himself, Wallahi la tanzilin, you're going to get off this horse and you're going to go grab that flag and continue fighting. And a famous line that he said he's talking to his nafs, to his soul. He's talking to his desires that long for this dunya and don't want to die. He says, Mali araki la turidina jannah. What is the matter with you that you do not want Jannah? He's talking to himself. Imagine in the middle of a battlefield. He's saying, what is wrong with you? You don't want Jannah? Jannah is minutes away. It is just walking into that battlefield and being killed as a shaheed. That is Jannah right there. And he made the decision to what? To stay on the path, and the decision that he made years ago. The path of istiqamah. The path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he made that decision and he was killed. And bi'idhnillah, as a shaheed in Jannah. But guess what? The value of what he sacrificed. The value and the reward that he got is much greater than what he sacrificed, his life or his wealth. It is much more. These are examples of real men that actually stood upon their decision of istiqamah and actually sacrificed for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and lost their lives and their wealth. And even if they didn't die, Abdullah ibn Rawah, before the battle started, The Muslims were in hesitation, 200,000 versus 3,000. Maybe we should go back to Rasulullah and ask him what we should do. Abdullah ibn Rawah stood in front of the whole entire Muslim army and he said, victory is not in numbers and it's not in resources. Victory is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was before the battle started, they had hesitation. He reminded them that victory is from Allah and it's not from numbers or resources. And he said, go and seek the two victories. What is the two victories he's calling for? Death, dying in the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and attaining Jannah, the greatest prize, and success, defeating them and raising the raya of Islam, the flag of Islam high and the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala high. So it is a win on either side. And he reminded them of this. You cannot lose if you stay on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No matter what you sacrifice, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you better in the akhirah. This is real men. This is actual men that have honor and pride and dignity. Now think back to the story that I gave you at the beginning. This is reality. How much do we sacrifice? And how much honor and pride? When the Quran, what more can we need? The Quran has been burned. The word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been burned multiple times as a mockery against Muslims and as a threat against Muslims and hate against Muslims. And what can we offer? What are we supposed to offer? Where is the manhood in us to stand up and sacrifice for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Otherwise, our generation is going to grow and grow, and the ummah is going to become so susceptible and normalized to these events happening to the Muslim world, just as it happened with these brothers, unfortunately. Where the Quran is being burned, and we say, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Is it a big deal if the Quran is burned, yani? Your pride and your honor has been destroyed, and you have nothing to say about it? So that's the level that we must attain. And like I said, it is not anything impossible. It is something that can be attained by mankind and has been attained by mankind. So remind yourself, every single time you make this decision again, and you renew this treaty or this promise with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I'm going to stay on the straight path today. And today I'm going to change. Be firm on it. And remember what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانِ. Allah is telling you that He made Iman beloved to you and something that you can accept. وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. And He made it something beloved to your hearts. So truly accept the meaning of Iman billah. Truly accept the meaning of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is and why I need to worship Him and why I need Him and why I need the victory of Islam, not the other way. The victory of Islam needs me or Allah's victory needs me. I need the victory of Islam. I need to follow Islam. I need to carry Islam to others because it's what's going to strengthen me and it's what's going to be a reason for me to enter Jannah bi'idhnillah on the day of judgment. Because remember what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بَلِ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرٌ. On the day of judgment, you're the ones that's going to be held accountable for your actions. Nobody here, even if your best friend or your brother reminds you to pray, or reminds you to come to Jumm'ah, or reminds you to read some Quran, or brings you to a session, or you encourage others, nobody has time for you. You have to make the decision for yourself, and you have to stay steadfast on this path on your own. Nobody's going to help you, because on the day of judgment, you're going to be alone. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم لسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And to finish off, to summarize, remember these points. Renew that promise with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Today, start right now, not next year, next week. Start today, renew that promise with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And leave and abandon everything that you've been doing that displeases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And only look for the reward. And sacrifice. And know that trials and tribulations are going to come. And know that it's going to be harder than not following the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we said. So remind yourself of these things. Remind yourself that I need to leave what displeases Allah. And I need to do what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remind yourself of true men that carried Islam. And most importantly, have honor and have dignity as Muslims. We need to have honor. We need to have honor and dignity and stand up for what we believe in. Otherwise, the deen of Islam is going to become like any other religion nowadays. If we don't stand up for it, and we stand firm on this path, it's going to become like anything else. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will choose people to carry this deen. But the question is, are you going to be one of them? Are you going to make the decision and effort to be one of those people? Or are you just going to sit back and let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choose certain people to carry His deen and get the reward while you're just wasting your time in this dunya? Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala ashraf al-khalq wal mursaleen Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد بعدد من قعد وقام اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد بعدد من صلى وصام اللهم صل على جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين والصحابة والتابعين وعلى عبادك الصالحين إلى يوم الدين يا رب العالمين اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منهم اللهم اخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه اللهم نور قلوبنا بنور الإيمان يا رب العالمين اللهم لا تدع لنا ذنبا في هذا اليوم المبارك إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا دينا إلا قضيته ولا مريضا إلا شافيته وعافيته يا رب العالمين عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون واذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله تعالى أعلى وأولى وأعز وأجل وأتم وأهم وأكبر وأقم الصلاة